morning, my lord.
I beg your pardon. Good morning, Mr. Caskey.
Good morning, my lord. Your hair is perfect now. I have a witness for you today, who is Mrs. Gillan.
Very good. Could we have the witness, please?
She's just being brought in. Good morning again.
Yes, good morning, Ms. Gillan.
Now, would you tell the inquiry your full name, please? And you're here today to talk about your husband, Mark.
Yes.
I understand that your husband was born on the 12th of January 1967 and sadly died on the 27th of April 2020.
Correct.
He was 53 when he died. You have four children?
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you to name them. It may be that some of them get named, but there is one daughter who shouldn't be named, and I think you know that.
Yeah.
So if you refer to her as my other daughter,
Yeah.
We can maintain her confidentiality. 5 years before your husband died, he was diagnosed with health problems. Can you tell us about those?
He had problems with breathing. We're not sure if it's related to the chemicals in the industry that he worked. So in the end, it was asthma. So I attended the asthma clinic regularly and progressively got worse. He had to do his peak flow and things like that regularly. And then pernicious anemia, which is a B12 deficiency. So he had to have injections regularly at the clinic to maintain the B12 levels.
Right. Now, although your husband's pre-existing health conditions are important, it's also important we know a bit about your husband. Can you tell us a bit about your husband, please?
Mark was strong, independent, charismatic, magnetic, loving, caring, understanding. You know the movie The Quiet Man? That was Mark. Until you got on the wrong side of him. And then you seen somebody that you didn't recognise. He was a lover of sports, of all sports. And he's an old Glaswegian man, so there wasn't a place for women at that time when he had it. But in the end, he'd even watch, as he said, resorted to women's football. So, but he hill walked, loved that, golf, fishing, anything. I mean, he was literally an all-rounder. He was scouted for amateur football in a league. And kind of loved the aspect that he could have went somewhere because he was talented, but just loved to party too much. So that one in the end. And
was he a family man?
100%. He was all for his family. We would often joke that he worked for almost 30 years in the one industry. He earned the wages and I spent them. And I would say, well, you know, Santa just doesn't happen. Now there's Easter Bunny, now there's Christmas. So, you know, so that was it. He would one time maybe say, or mostly every month he'd say to me, it's boys' night out. He would have once a month with all the boys. Loved it, looked forward to it. And he'd be like, I get paid today, Jan. And I'd be like, yeah. And he went, have I got money to go out for a pint? And I'm like, well, there's £20. So, and that was it. He just accepted it. So he worked for us. His life was us.
Now, you spoke to me, or you spoke to the inquiry about the health problems that he had, the asthmatic condition and the pernicious anemia. One of the things that you say right at the front of your witness statement is you talk about shielding and shielding letters. Do you want to say something about that?
Obviously, this happened right at the very, very start of the pandemic. None of us knew anything about it. We weren't big news people. Mark had been kind of Googling on his phone because he seemed to take a kind of avid interest in it. I was oblivious to it until they decided, you know, man, education. That's where I was working at the time. We were shutting down, and that's when I thought, oh, wait a minute, something's happening. We had watched it prior to bits here and there, Italy, things like that, but nothing. We didn't think it would be something that would come to the way it has. But Mark had more or less convinced us, because he automatically thought he would qualify for shielding with his 2 underlying conditions. He religiously took the first 2 weeks in April every year for his holidays, his spring holidays, because that coincided with the twins' birthdays. And he'd spoke to his line manager and said, I'm not due my holidays, but I'm expecting to be shielded because his work, he was a key worker. So what they did is moved his holidays forward. So,
did he ever get a shielding letter?
never.
And did you have any explanation as to why he didn't?
No.
No, no one's ever explained. Have you asked?
Initially, I didn't know who to ask, and we didn't know who to ask. We just expected it would come through the practice, the GP.
But it never arrived?
I never arrived.
Okay. You said that he was a key worker,
Yeah.
and that he had been in the same industry for 30 years, I think you said.
Yeah.
What was he?
He made soap for a living.
Soap?
Soap, yeah. So, I don't know, the Queensley Industrial Estate, and it was Soapworks. So he ran a line, his only line. That was his baby. When any of the machines broke down, he was so experienced that it wasn't his job, but he could get the line up and running faster. So they left him to it. Obviously, the soap was supposed to be supporting us to combat the disease that was fast approaching our country.
So, in terms of the workload that his factory, or the output of his factory, was that increased
Yeah.
when COVID started to feature?
The managing director had a meeting with actually the council, and yeah, they'd said that they would go a 3-shift pattern instead of a 2-shift pattern, which most of the staff were on. So it increased so that the factory was working for 24 hours instead of, you know, the 2-shift pattern.
So that would be 16 hours. So it went up from about 16 to a full 24 hours.
Yeah.
And did Mark change his hours?
He felt that with his underlying conditions that he couldn't cope with it. He had a slight irregularity in his heart as well. So he felt it was easier for just to stay in the 2-shift pattern.
And whilst he was working, was he given any PPE or was he given any instruction about social distancing?
Nothing existed at that time.
Nothing?
Nothing.
At that time? Now I think at paragraph 18 in your witness statement, you talk about a particular event that happened at your husband's place of work. Can you tell us about that?
It was on Tuesday the 17th of March, and Mark obviously was on his own line. There was 2 family members that had came to work that day. The younger one was on...
Not his family?
No.
Not your...
No, it was just two of the employees.
Two employees in the same family?
In the same family. One of the younger ones was on Mark's line. Obviously, they were a different nationality, and Mark spoke slight in their tongue. He had to learn because obviously there was so many. And
so he ended up speaking a bit of Romanian?
Polish.
Polish.
So he said the pleasantries, good morning and whatever in language, and then he said the younger one spoke to Mark and said, can I speak to you? So the crux of it was there was someone in their household that was suspected to have the symptoms of this new disease. By this point, the two of them were in the factory and had been coughing, and that's where it was. So Mark felt really strongly, took the younger man, asked him to repeat to the CEO, and said, you tell him what you've just told me. So with that, the two of them, father and son, were sent home.
They were sent home?
Sent home.
When Mark came home, how was he?
He basically told us, and I saw the other side of my husband that we weren't used to seeing, the angry man, saying, can people not follow the rules? They were told if there's suspected symptoms, this was very early, to stay at home, but the need for financial gain for that family took over the rules that, if you have symptoms, stay home. So they opted to go to work. So he was extremely angry.
Shortly after that, did he develop a health problem?
Mark started just days after that to show symptoms, which we put down to man flu, because one of the younger ones has a higher in drama, and I think that's where she gets it from her dad. When he was ill, everybody knew about it. But at the same time, one of the other twins was showing symptoms as well. So what Mark had, the other one didn't have, my daughter didn't have, and then they swapped symptoms. So as one gained a symptom, the other one lost a symptom.
And what were the symptoms?
It was hot and cold, so it was like fever-like symptoms. He started to lose his taste and smell. Couldn't keep a sip of water down. He had diarrhoea, aches and pains all over his body. Couldn't get heat in him, and then the cough. Dreaded cough.
Did he contact a doctor of the NHS?
He phoned the helpline that was advised because he'd Googled it, and was told to stay at home and isolate, basically what the two employees in the work that were sent home, so isolate for 14 days.
Right. And at this time, one of your daughters was also ill, is that correct?
Yeah.
Sorry?
It coincided. The two of them were ill at the exact same time.
You say that you have a record, and I'm not going to ask you to show us or anything like that, but of your husband contacting NHS 24.
It's on his mobile.
And do you know when that was?
25th of March.
25th of March. Now, you talk in your witness statement about his symptoms, or paragraph 23, yes? Is there anything you want to add in terms of the symptoms that he had?
His breathing, shortness of breath, his breathing came extremely difficult to even talk. He would just nod. His feet turned blue, parts couldn't get heat in him. And he really excruciating pain over his body. He did highlight to us that he could feel this destroying his insides.
Right. Did he make contact again with NHS 24?
Yep, he did on the 1st of April, 1432.
And what?
Told to take paracetamol and continue self-isolating.
Right. In paragraph 25, you provide a fairly graphic description of what was happening in the house at that time, where you had 2 people that you suspected might have COVID. Can you just describe that for Lord Brailsford, please?
We live in a 3-bedroomed, 1-bathroomed home. So Ebony has a range of extreme health issues, physical, mental and emotional. So it was quite intense with Ebony. She was, at that particular point, a focal point. For her not to eat, it was dangerous. For her, she has an eating disorder. So she couldn't keep a sip of water down. So she was isolated in her room, and we were doing our best to do what we could for her and put her food outside the door, knowing that she couldn't eat it. Her mouth was sore, her body was sore. She just wanted to sleep, which wasn't good for Ebony either. We had 1 toilet, so when she was using the toilet, we were sanitising. At this particular point, there wasn't any tests, so we didn't know. We didn't even dare think that it would be COVID, because we didn't know enough about it. We just thought both of them had a really bad flu-like symptoms, that Ebony's immune system was shot through the eating disorder, and her mental health was extremely poor. So I was running between my husband downstairs in a makeshift bed and Ebony upstairs, and the youngest one and the other twin and myself were doing our best to have the household sanitised at every moment. Anything they touched, we would say, don't touch it. We'll do it. Paper plates, so we could just dispose of everything. Just everything and anything we could do to try and just keep it as clean and virus-free.
From the witness statement, I see that both the 4th of April and the 5th of April and the 6th of April are important dates in your house. Why are they both important?
The twins have got different birthdays, and Dad was the life and soul of the party. I did the trimmings, he did the dance parties and the music, and there was always a glass of something.
So your daughters are twins,
yeah,
but they have different birthdays by 1.
Ebony was born the 5th of April, 20 minutes before midnight, which was unheard of at the time. It's usually 20 minutes, half an hour, when they take the other baby out, but there was complications with Hope. Hope was born almost 2 hours from her twin.
Right.
So it set precedent right away, so we decided.
So tell me about those birthdays in 2020. How was your husband?
It was their 20th birthday, and he sat on the couch, which was a makeshift bed, with a blanket over him, not moving, not participating, not talking, not even involved in any shape or form. So this was night and day. This complete contrast of the man that would be, oh, okay, because I bought the presents, he paid for them, and as they opened it, they'd be like, that's nice, and he'd nod over to me. Nothing, there was no response. It was a shell of a man, a shell of a person.
Can I ask, this isn't something that's in your statement, I'm just interested. Did you see a difference in him between the 5th and the 6th?
Yeah.
Tell me about that difference.
In the morning, the 6th, he broke down, and I've never saw my husband cry.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, I know what this is doing to me. I don't want to die, Jan.
Did you make contact with doctors or the hospital on that day?
No, because Hope was, he knew the connection that Hope and him had. She was. He didn't want to go in her day. He didn't. He just couldn't. He couldn't.
Did you do something the next day about it?
In the morning, that night, after he broke down, she saw her dad and she said to her dad, "What's wrong?" And he said nothing. I said, "Your dad's just exhausted. He's not slept for 2 weeks." So she accepted that, and then she said, "We'll just watch a movie." So we watched her dad's favourite movie on her birthday. That night, when the girls all settled, he said, "I don't want to be alone, Jan." So I blew up bed. And we didn't sleep, but I made a makeshift bed and he lay down for the first 10, 20 minutes. He got up and I fed him with cough medicine, which was supposed to be drowsy, but the cough just kept, he just couldn't sleep. He couldn't sleep. Couldn't settle. So he was in the chair, he was on the bed, he was standing, he was lying, anywhere that he could sit to sort of prevent, picked him up on pillows, the cough. So in the morning of the 7th, it was a beautiful spring morning, and we went out the back, got beautiful wee bistro set at the top, and we would always have our breakfast out there. I made him a cup of tea, couldn't keep it down, sip of water. Had my coffee. One of the girls, Ebony, started to pick up, so she sat with her dad because you were frightened. He'd fainted a couple of times, so you were frightened he'd fell off the chair. And I said, "I'll go for my shower," and I come back down as she went for her shower. She started to feel a bit more of herself. And then he just said, "It's time, Jan." My heart sank.
Did you phone the doctor at that
We
point?
phoned again at 111. We had to speak to the receptionist. She took some details, put the phone down. Then there was another phone call for another person asking more symptoms, more detail, what to speak to Mark. Mark couldn't speak, couldn't hold a sentence. So they had to do all this Data Protection Act, and he just said, I said, "You need to give him yes or no answers." And it was a yes and a no, a yes and a no, and passed the phone back to me. And then we put the phone down, and then it was a consultant that phoned. And another batch of questions, which was very similar again. So even that was a lengthy process. And then they said they needed to be seen. They needed to be seen.
And did they arrange an ambulance? Did
They asked me if I could drive them to the hub. And I said, "No, I can't. I've got a kid in here that's sick. I don't know what she's got, I don't know what they've got." And I still didn't think for a split second it was COVID. I just kept thinking it was the flu.
So was an arrangement made to transport?
They brought a car very similar to my own, 7-seater. The back of it was all sealed with this clear film. The driver came out, said his name, and handed me a mask, which was the first I'd ever seen a mask, a gown and gloves, and asked me to gown, glove and mask. Mark.
Right, so the driver asked you to put PPE onto Mark,
Yeah.
and you did, yeah? And then did the driver assist him to the car? What
No,
happened?
the driver stayed at the distance. He stayed at the passenger side of the car. Mm-hmm. The 3 girls were at the doorway. I was trying to do my best to put PPI on Mark. I'd given him all his meds, I'd written everything all down. I'd given him all the wee bits and made sure he had a charger for his phone. Put them all in his jacket pocket because he wanted to be fully dressed. I don't know why, but he wanted to be, he hadn't been dressed for 2 weeks, but he wanted to be fully suited and booted. He didn't want to go into a hospital looking the way he looked, so we even helped him shave that morning.
Was there any other, you said that you'd taken his phone charger?
Fitbit.
Sorry?
His Fitbit, which the girls had got him for Christmas. And Ebony, who was ill along with him, was competing with him with steps every day. It was a kind of running joke with her and Ebony, him and Ebony. And that went with him as well. That was on his wrist. His phone was in his pocket. And I said to the driver, "It's precious cargo." And he went, "I know, hen. I'll get him back as soon as. He'll be fine. He's in good hands." And I just nodded. So with that, Mark was still trying to keep all the way all through this. He just kept saying, "Don't come near me, don't come near me, don't come near me." So if we passed him, he would have to go the furthest path in the house. His food, with a table, we just left the food. Never ate anything anyway, but even that last moment we saw him, I pushed past him and I gave him a cuddle. And he kept pushing me away and he kept, "Don't come near me, I don't want to catch you, don't come near me." I did say to him I loved him. I gave him a kiss on the cheek. And he turned away and he got himself into the cab. And I shut the door. The driveway, I stood and watched him. In the driveway. Watched the car go away. And I turned around and saw the three girls and they were on the floor.
Do you want a moment?
I'll be okay.
Paragraph 34. You say the following, and I'll read it rather than you. "We never saw Mark again after that. There were no words to describe how we feel. Our beautiful daughter and I stood at the front door as Mark was driven off. None of us knew at that point this would be the last time we would see, touch or speak to Mark. We're still traumatised by that day, and it will stay with us forever." Does that accurately reflect your view?
Yeah.
So he's off to the hospital. How long does it take before you hear from the hospital?
It was 6 hours before we knew where he was. It was Mark that contacted us by text to tell me.
Sorry, can you speak up just a bit?
Sorry. It was about 6 hours before we heard absolutely anything.
And who did you hear from?
Mark.
So the hospital didn't contact you with
No.
any information. And what did Mark indicate to you? It was a text, so...
He texted on
What did he
WhatsApp
say?
to tell us that he texted me directly that he tested positive for COVID. I didn't tell the girls. I knew that they wouldn't be able to cope with it. So I just said that's to go to another hospital to get another batch of tests. Because at that point he just said, "I've got COVID, I've got it," was what he texted. And I have to go for other tests, but we didn't know where he was. We didn't know where the other tests were taking place. So it wasn't until I got into Glasgow Royal Infirmary and texted again, said, "I'm waiting to be seen here."
Did he go on to a ward or...?
Eventually he sent us a picture of himself in a hospital gown, masked, oxygen, and said, "I've finally got a room in my own."
Right. He said something to you, I think, about his ability to use or benefit from oxygen.
He said he'd given him just oxygen and it hadn't been successful. Then they'd put him on the CPAP machine, and his exact words was, "It's a test of my strength, Jan."
Why? Tell me about, did you get any information as to why he found that difficult?
Obviously, he never explained, because even texting after, I'm presuming, after texting was draining because he had asthma. His lungs were already damaged, and to put that amount of oxygen into his lungs, this is only my perception, was just a step too far for him to cope with.
Now, by this point, you had been caring for your husband and your daughter whilst they appeared to be quite seriously ill for a period of 2 weeks?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. And then your husband is taken into hospital and you find out, you're told by him, that he has COVID. Did you find out if he changed the area that he was in the Glasgow Royal?
He basically just said to us that he never told us where, it was a hub. So I still to this day don't know where he was when he left directly home. But at that point, he just said he had been waiting to scene, which I assumed was accident emergency, and then went into a room, and that was the last I had heard, because Mark was texting the girls as well as ourselves individually. And I said, is this too much for you? And he said, yeah. So even texting on the phone was too much. So we arranged our girls group chat, and he continued to text them. And I opted to have his energy be used for the girls.
Right. And was he moved into a specialist unit eventually?
He went into high dependency after the initial room.
And how do you know that?
Because I phoned the hospital and I asked the hospital what was happening, and they told me he'd been shifted after that into a high dependency because his oxygen, it wasn't, they couldn't level it. So he'd been in and given me a number to phone, and that was the ward. I have the ward number and the telephone number, and ask for them anytime. So that was then. So that's why I knew that he'd went to there. Now,
I'm sure we can all understand that by this stage, with all of the things that had happened over the preceding fortnight, you're exhausted. Did you manage to sleep at all?
For the fortnight, no. I was in high alert because the cough for both of them. Ebony's wasn't as extreme as what our dad's was. So I just thought, okay, he's in the high dependency ward. He's well looked after because that's what they told me would happen. And got the girls settled, and I said, if I hear anything, I'll obviously let you know. And I went for a shower and went to my bed, and I slept roughly about 4 or 5 hours for the first time.
What did you find when you woke up?
Missed calls. Yeah, ICU. Immediately panicked.
And you would phone them back straight away. And what did they tell you?
Mark tried to speak to me before they put them in an induced coma, and I missed it. He said it's all right, she'll be sleeping, she needs her sleep.
Was he right? Was he right?
I still have the guilt.
Was he right? Or are you going to tell this inquiry he was wrong? What contact did you have with the ICU after that?
None.
Nothing at all?
I called them. I called them regularly. I got a phone call. After that news, the girls woke up. We sat, and I explained what had been happening, and we all sat in designated seats because we still thought, okay, this is in the house, it's been in the house, we cleaned. And we got a phone call from the hospital. Bear in mind, sleep deprivation and confusion and stress levels. I thought it was ICU it was calling, and it wasn't. It was just a person asking if they could use Mark in a trial drug.
Okay, I'll come back to that in a second. Okay. Had they put Mark into an induced coma?
Yeah.
Right. At paragraph 41, you provide something of a timeline in relation to that, about the time from Mark leaving the house to being put into an induced coma. Can you just give us the dates and times?
It's 2 p.m. on the 7th of April 2020, and by 2 a.m. on the 8th of April 2020, he was in a induced coma. My brain still can't, to this day, process how fast this disease has changed our lives.
Now, you spoke a moment ago about a doctor making contact, but it wasn't one of the treating doctors. It was a doctor who was involved in experimental drugs, asking if they could be supplied to Mark.
Yeah.
And what was your reaction to that?
Confusion. We hadn't heard any information on Mark's health or any aspect for any other field admission or anything for the staff for any place that he'd been treated. So there was a lot of confusion. But when she asked me, and couldn't take anything in, and I'd said to her, what is this? And she said, one will be a clinical trial drug which has been successful in America. She named the drug. And then she says the other one will be a placebo effect. This is so effectively you're using Mark as a guinea pig.
And?
I said, I need to think about it.
Uh-huh.
So we come off the phone and we thought about it, and some were for as a family, which we always done, some were against. And in the end, I had to make a decision, and I based that on Mark signed for his organs to be donated. So I thought, if he's going to give something back, this is the time. So I based it on, yeah, okay, go for it.
And did they?
Yeah.
And we know that Mark subsequently died. How long from the point at which you said yes to the point at which he died?
That was on the 8th of the morning, and Mark died on the 27th of April.
Now, during that period, you had a couple of phone calls from nurses at the hospital. One asked about his hair.
Sorry?
One asked about his hair.
It's when I was on. I didn't have one phone call from the doctors all the way through this until his heart stopped. So that was further into the couple of weeks. But I was the one that called regularly. We took it upon ourselves because we weren't getting any information from Mark. There was no visitation. You know, we had no iPads to call him. We had Hope had been excessively calling his mobile, no matter whether he was answering, whether he wasn't. She just needed that connection with her dad. So, and that was her way of coping. But one of the every 4 hours we called religiously. And one of the nurses asked what he liked his hair. His hair was more or less the same colour as yourself, and he always parted it to the one side. He would get it, he could do that fast, he would get it almost scalped in. There wasn't any hair, but obviously the process that had been, in the length of time he was in there, that it had started to grow out and they set his hair in this
Why was she
position.
asking, and how did that make you feel?
I think she was just compassionate, and I think she was just good at her job, and I think she had a lot of empathy. She knew that we couldn't visit, she knew we couldn't be with him, she knew, and I think just that simple act. That, and another one asked about, you know, we keep putting him on his side, and I says he doesn't sleep on that side, he sleeps on his right side. And she says, I was wondering why the monitors are going off, and I said, well, that's why. He doesn't like sleeping on that side, so he's telling you. So but they two, that and one other thing.
We'll come on to the other thing.
Was the only things that was humane about this time in hospital.
We've heard evidence from other witnesses about end-of-life visits. Was Mark, during this period, likely to be at the end of his life?
As far as we were led to believe, no.
Uh-huh.
No. Whether we were in denial or the information we were getting every 4 hours was he was stable, we've proned him, we've unproned him, you know, language we didn't even understand, you know, we had, even before we got any information, every 4 hours we had to give a key code. And all you were shouting at them is, just tell me if my husband's alive or dead. Just tell me if my husband's alive or dead. I mean, your brain was just mush. Sometimes you forgot the key code, you had to write it down. Just tell me he's alive or dead. That was all you wanted to know every 4 hours. Is he alive or is he dead?
Was there ever any talk of the possibility of you visiting?
Never. Never even discussed, never brought up. Nothing.
But you did speak to them when you called for updates, and you say something at paragraph 53 about the difficulty that you had in comprehending the updates. Can you just tell us about that?
It was just the language they used. I'm an education background, and I'm not stupid by no means, but obviously medical is beyond my
Experience.
level. Yeah, it's beyond my level and it's beyond Mark's level, so we started to record and take notes of all the calls so that we could listen back to ourselves because of the anxiety, the stress and everything we were under. We couldn't retain any of the information. Still to this day, retaining information is a challenge. So notes is beneficial for me and visuals beneficial for me, so we had to Google a lot of the language.
Sorry, and so you would write down words you didn't understand and then Google them?
Yeah.
So it wasn't the doctor who was explaining things in a manner you could understand?
No, they spoke in their speak, not ours. And I did ask, can you break this into layman's terms? You know, medical for dummies, basically, because that's exactly what we are. We haven't got a clue what you're saying, and treat us that way. We're happy for you to, as long as we're understanding what you're doing to him.
Okay. You say something about who it was you were able to speak to at the hospital at paragraph 54. Could you just read that paragraph?
I did notice that when first Mark went in, it was a consultant who gave us updates when I called. Then it was ICU nurses, and then towards the end, it was a nurse who was drafted in to sit with Mark that I spoke to. I felt they had given up on him, and she told me that she didn't really have any ICU experience and had been drafted in from another ward.
On the 27th of April, you did get a phone call from the hospital finally, and I'm looking at paragraph 55. Can you tell us about that phone call?
Basically, they were telling us that obviously his irregularity, his heart, and I kept saying to the girls, as long as his dad's heart's all right, we've got a chance. But that came as a massive blow. His heart had to be shocked and restarted twice that day. And that they suspected that his lungs were badly scarred and stiffed.
Badly scarred and
Stiff.
stiff. Was there any discussion, for example, about a do not resuscitate
No,
notice?
no.
What was said about that kind of thing, about decisions in relation to whether or not to resuscitate him?
They basically told me that it was clear to them that he wasn't going to recover.
Sorry, you need to say that again. It was clear to them.
To them that he was never going to recover from this.
Right. Was the possibility raised of an end-of-life visit at that stage?
No. when they told me about his heart, I had more or less packed a bag and been prepared. In my mind, I was going up. I had comfortable clothes and stuff that I needed to sit in that room and be with him.
For as long as need be.
Yeah.
Sorry, give me a second. Were you given any information about what the consequences, if you had gone in, were?
I more or less said that I said I was coming up, and what was the procedure? I asked, because obviously we still didn't really know what was going on, or it was very confusing. And they told me basically that if I come up, I'd have been the only family member to sit with their loved ones in their final hours. Nobody had done it before me. That didn't deter me. I just thought, okay, there's got to be a first somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, but if you do come up, you and your family will need to isolate for 14 days, which means you will miss his funeral. And I didn't know how to deal with that. I just didn't even know how to respond to that. It was, to this day, I was like, how do you decide?
Was there any suggestion made about someone going apart from you?
Yeah.
Who?
They did offer another piece of advice or information, was if there was anybody from my household could come up, it would be the youngest, it would have the best survivors rate of this. They did actually say to me, if I had came up one droplet, this is something that's just come back to me, of COVID, would all it would take, and I would take over Mark's ventilator. He did say that to me.
That you would take over?
I would take over the ventilator. So she would be the easiest option.
Who? One
Brenna,
of your daughters?
the youngest. The youngest.
Yes.
So, and the final blow was, but even if she does come up and she sits with her dad, we still wouldn't be able to make the funeral because we would need to isolate. Any member of our household sat with him, we would have to isolate.
The whole family would need to isolate?
Yeah.
Did you make a decision on the basis of that information?
Again, we sat and we discussed, and I ended up having to take the lead because the family was split, and Brenna's never forgiven me for that. She felt that was something that she could have coped with, even at a young age. She was only 18. She sits at the grave now because she couldn't sit with her dad then.
Does she do that often?
Yep.
Is there a
At
particular...
night.
Sorry?
At night, in the dark. She just drives herself, sits at her dad's grave.
Okay. The next thing that I want to ask you about is your husband's death and his funeral. Now, there are two ways we can do this, and I'm going to make a suggestion. And the suggestion is I basically summarise what happened. Lord Brailsford will have your statement, and he will see that in full. But I think, given the extent to which you're upset, rather than walking you through it, as I've done with the other things, I'll summarise it. And hopefully I'll summarise it fairly.
I feel as if I can cope with it, I'd rather cope with it.
Okay. There was one particular nurse who helped you and Mark at the time of his death. You can't name him,
Yep.
but tell us what he did.
When we got a phone call to say that they had decided they were switching off Mark's machines, life support.
They being the hospital.
They made all the decisions.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a choice in any of these decisions. There wasn't advised in any of these decisions. I had no control. I wasn't even consulted in any shape or form. The hospital done what they wanted to do for Mark without anything to do with us. So, but when they decided they were switching off the machines, they had told us that's what they were doing. They had a duty of care to Mark. That's how they delivered it to us.
And was there an individual nurse
Yes.
who was dealing with Mark? Again, you can't name him, so we'll refer to him as that nurse.
He basically, I begged him not to leave Mark for a second. And he assured me and reassured me that he wouldn't. And that what they did ask when they delivered the news that they were switching machines off was, what do you want us to do? And I said, what do you mean? What do you want me to do? Because everybody here wanted to be there, and that's what I want you to allow me to do. I want you to allow me to be with my husband. 37 years of my life, I want you to allow me to do that, and you're telling me I can't, so you tell me what you can allow me to do.
And what could he allow you to do?
He says he could play some music in the background of his favourite song. And for that moment, I couldn't even remember his favourite song. I fell to the floor, and it just went right out of my head, screaming, and I lifted the phone. My initial was to phone my sister and tell me. And I knew the song, I just couldn't at that moment. So I phoned the hospital straight back, obviously hysterical. My sister was then hysterical because she didn't know what was going on at that moment. And then I told the person that was sitting with Mark, and that's what he played in the background.
And I understand the nurse phoned someone else.
He did ask me, she said he wasn't supposed to, but he asked me if Mark, what religion Mark was, and I told him, and he said to us, okay, I said, I'm not supposed to ask, he says, but I'm Catholic as well. And I just thought, right, and I never thought anything else of that. I just thought, okay, he's maybe just try to take an interest or whatever, you know, and that was it. But I later found out that he had took it upon himself to phone his parish priest and say a mass. The priest was saying the mass over the phone. He was saying the mass to Mark while holding his hand.
And is that something that provides you with comfort?
I was overwhelmed that somebody could take it upon himself to do something so compassionate. You know, he just did what any humane person would do under circumstances, and this is what he thought he could do. A simple thing like that just made such a difference to us.
I understand Mark died at 11:05 p.m.
Yeah. I did ask, because nobody prepared me when they switched the machines off how long it would be, or if he'd be in pain or anything like that. Nobody gave me any of that information, so I asked that. And they did video it, which I've never been able to watch. They asked me, you know.
What is actual passing?
Yeah. So I have it on a fob. They sent it to me in a fob. That was their, I suppose, way of compromise. I mean, they were not allowed to be in.
Death certificate. How and when did you get the death certificate?
It's ironic.
The hospital papers that result in...
It's ironic. I wasn't allowed to sit and hold his hand when he was taking his last moments. But I could go up to the same hospital the following morning and collect his death certificate. And that angers me. Just bewildered with that one.
And did you go?
No. So I couldn't walk into the same hospital after not being allowed the night before.
How did you get the paperwork that you need to
Close
get?
family friend drove.
And he collected it on your behalf. What about Mark's belongings?
Most of them were incinerated. We got his phone back, which tracked his Fitbit, which was on his wrist. Last known whereabouts was in the hospital, and it was lost.
The Fitbit was lost?
Yeah. Never come back. The only thing we got back was his phone.
Got his phone
and
back.
a jacket.
There was a problem with the jacket?
Yep. The jacket was packed to this specialised whatever. It had to be... I got more instructions from how to wash this jacket than I did what was happening with my husband. So it had to be washed in the highest temperature in my machine. We left outdoors for 14 days and we washed in the highest temperature. with a specialised backpack solution which made it go red and stuck to it. So basically that was his jacket ruined.
I take it his body was taken to the undertakers.
Yep, directly.
And
14 days I had to lie wait before they could pick him up.
but once the body's picked up and goes to the undertakers, do you see him?
We were told no, but fortunately our undertakers broke some rules. It was a woman.
I'm not going to ask you to name them.
No, she was a woman. She was very nice.
And you saw?
Yes.
You saw Mark at rest?
Yep. I had to see him. 2 of my girls are on the spectrum. I had to see them. That was a must. They needed to see. All my girls needed to see. This was their first ever experience of death.
Okay. I think we all have a fairly clear impression about the impact that Mark's death has had on you. But do you want to say something about that?
To this day, drinking water, opening doors, the amount of people that's in this room scares me, terrifies me. Don't use public transport. I did today, pushed myself out my comfort zone. It Mark's past almost 4 years and I'm still living in the pandemic. Coughs, music, triggers, smells. I sanitise everything. You know, these are all triggers. Everything takes me back to that 2-week period. I watched him die, not knowing he was going to die. Emotionally, physically, mentally. I'm the same person. That the girls keep saying that. We want their old mum back. She's gone.
And what about the children? Impact on them? You've already spoken about one who goes to the grave at night.
Yeah, Brenna used to be life and soul of the party. She was very sociable, and now she's half the person she was. She's now medicated as well. So once the bubbly, live, outgoing, friendly person is now a shell of a person. Ebony has got a range of all sorts of needs, and Ebony is in complete denial, absolute complete denial.
I'm going to ask you to go through each of them, but remember there's one of them that you can't name.
Yeah, I know. I'm really going to only focus on the 3 girls at home anyway. Yeah. So Ebony has put her whole heart and soul and her life since her dad passed into her education. She's just graduated in June, psychology, and went back to do her masters. So that's how she channels her grief. It's her coping mechanism. But can't say dad's dead. Can't say dad's coming back.
Tell me about the funeral.
Well, no, sorry, excuse me if I'm allowed.
Sorry.
Hope is
my
the
fault.
youngest one of the and she's destroyed. She's a recluse. She is higher on the spectrum than her twin. Her dad was her life. She'd go hill walking, football, everything with her dad was her best friend. So she shut down for the first several weeks. Wouldn't shower, wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep, wouldn't do anything except her dad. Her dad was her world, still is. She's sitting in her dad's seat. She is now taking over the father role. You know, my dad wouldn't do this, my dad wouldn't do that. This is dad's seat. This is how dad cook things. This is how dad... But she won't go to the shop for a pint of milk. She won't come out of the house. So a lot of her has died along with her dad.
Tell me about the funeral.
The morning of the funeral, obviously it's like everyone else that's went through it is horrific itself. But we couldn't do the normal things at the funeral. I had decided that he would come home. We wanted him to come home for the last time. And he'd spent 30 years of his life in his work. So I think the least he could do was drive by his work. So the undertaker came in, I couldn't get out of the house because I knew that if I walked out the house, the rest of my life was going to change that moment that I walked out. So one of my daughters, she's the calmest at a lot of them. What can we do? I said, go and get Dad's picture. So we ran upstairs. I had his picture in his hand, which always gave me the strength. He was calm. She says, right, we can do this. I said, okay, we got to the door, and as soon as I opened the door, there was this sea of people, the whole of the estate, social distancing, which was a massive shock for me. Don't know how I got into the car. I had to drive myself because we weren't allowed family cars. So we'd follow the hearse, just a sea of people. Some of them because he was a Celtic man, some of them in Celtic tops, some of them in green balloons, green flowers, and just all tossed in your road. All the way out our cul-de-sac, all the way down the street, all the way down to the main road. Mark only worked like a mile away from it, even up until there was a short break without people. And as we entered the street where Mark works, the factory, there was bagpipers playing, and it was more of the same. Past, present, staff all over the place, paying their last respects for Matt, bowing their heads and clapping their hands. All the while I was driving, couldn't support my girls, couldn't hold their hands. It was horrific itself because nobody had prepared us for what was going to happen. They did it as a nice thing, but it was intense for the girls to be able to, you know, looking back now, it was an amazing send-off for him. Testament to the man he is, was.
Not everyone reacted well, as it were, to your husband's death, or in the way that people had come out to provide support. You spoke about your daughters being on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And that's something that you have particular knowledge of because of your work.
Yeah.
Previously. What was your work previously?
I worked with extreme additional needs, black kids, all ranges, ADHD, autism, any disability of any shape or form. I was in the firing line. That was my role.
Did you will have needed to take some time off work after Mark passed?
We were actually off for a good part of it anyway. The schools were off. But then I just still this numb bubble. You know, this is disbelief, denial. And I couldn't function. I couldn't get out of bed most days. You know, how are you supposed to, 37 years of your life is this person's here and then there's not.
Did your employer provide you with any occupational support in terms of return to work?
As I was handing in sick lines and as the length of time was progressing, they gave us an occupational phone call because that's how it was done then. They just phoned and everything was done over the phone. There wasn't even a video call, and I broke down several times throughout it. The person that was doing it basically supported my case and said that I was unfit for work. So, yeah, I was doing the right thing, off and recuperating and doing the best that I could each day.
But did they supply you with
No.
occupational therapists or anything like that?
No, it was a one-time phone call. And they evaluated that phone call and their findings went to Glasgow City Council, and Glasgow City Council then proceeded that as the time was passing that I was unfit for work, so they sacked me 20 months after I lost Mark. So my career and my husband, the two most consistent, along with the 3 girls at home, gone.
Now, and towards the end of your statement, you talk about still living in fear of COVID.
Yep.
Is that your daily life?
Yep. Yeah, I was actually trying to get a mask as I entered the door there, and then stopped, and I thought, do I, do not, do I, do not, because I've been ridiculed for wearing masks. So, you know, I still sanitise. I sanitise in every pocket. You know, even when I was offered coffee there, no, because I won't drink out the cups. You know, so everything, social, I still social distance. I do what I say at this dance. When people come close, I move back. So yeah, COVID's a massive part of my life and the girls' lives.
Paragraph 96 through to 99. You talk about essentially what we need to do better. Can you summarise that? Lord Brailsford will read those paragraphs.
I just feel as if the plans, which weren't existent, need to be put in place. They need to be thoroughly executed, checked, practised regularly, to check that they're working. Vaccine programmes should be sped up. Combat this in every way. Map plans it. You know, make sure people know their roles in the plans. There's too much pressure on the NHS. Government needs to be open and honest and make good choices. People are still dying.
Could you read paragraph 101, please?
I still can't believe that Mark didn't get shielding from this shielding letter. Whoever made that decision on setting the criteria sentenced him to death. It's likely they put the noose around his neck. I'm angry, and I would like to know who made that decision, as whoever done that failed him.
I don't have any other questions for you apart from one. I've tried to get across from you all of the evidence that you've presented to the inquiry. Is there anything important that hasn't been covered?
No, but I would, if I may, read something out.
Yes?
Yeah. Basically want to say is, can I start with a thank you for each and individual person involved with the COVID inquiry. Without every one of you, our loved ones' voices would not be heard. It's a great honour to be representing Mark and every life that is lost. Mark was and still is a huge part of our daily lives. I had the privilege of sharing my life with Mark for 37 years. Mark was a loving, caring, kind, gentle, funny and compassionate man who was a magnetic force. Loved by every person he encountered. He was strong, independent, with a huge passion for sports, hill walking, golf. His younger years, he was played amateur football. He was scouted for a professional team, but loved to party too much. Mark worked hard and played hard. As you all look forward to this festive season, this will be our fourth Christmas without Mark. This once so magical time is now one of extreme emotions and dread. Like so many millions of others who have lost their loved ones, Christmas is now full of great sadness and regret. Mark portrayed he was Scrooge at Christmas, which was one of his favourite movies, but in fact he was the complete opposite. He would decorate our home inside and out with twinkling lights and Christmas decorations. He showered us with an abundance of love and laughter and, of course, presents, making it the most wonderful time of the year. He claimed when the girls were younger, he could call the snowman and knew Santa well enough to have him on speed dial. He was our hero. Usually it's the mother who keeps the family together. For myself and our girls, it was Mark. He was the centre of our gravity, the heart, the life and the soul of our family. For myself and our girls, our beautiful girls and I mourn his death with every breath we take and every landmark he's missed. We all live with the guilt and regret. Grief grips and it doesn't give up. The world is moving on from COVID. We stand on the sidelines and watch not moving forward, and can't go back, we're frozen in time. We feel we have failed Mark and must live with that guilt. We struggle with the fact that he didn't get shielding. We never got that moment to hold his hand or quietly sit with Mark in his final moments. Moments that stole from us. We, the COVID bereaved, would like the inquiry. See from this inquiry transparency, the truth, honesty, accountability, and not shift the blame, to know that these lessons will be learnt. Crystal clear plans are put in place and practised to the fullest, and everyone knows their role in this. To learn from the countries that had less fatalities, clearly they're doing something correct. To feel reassured that when I am blessed with biological grandchildren, there will be a pandemic-free life for them to exist in. A day that we can honour our dead. And when the inquiry comes to an end, and you are making those final decisions, imagine it was your loved ones that died for COVID during the pandemic. Take a moment to feel how you wish to feel you would be treated if it was your loved one. The COVID bereaved, thank you for all your time.
Time is not a difficulty. Thank you very much, Mrs. Gillan.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Gillan. Very grateful. We'll take a break now and come back at about 25 to 12, Mr. Caskey.
Yes, please. Yes, please, sir.
Thank you.
Good morning again, my lord.
Good morning, Mr. Caskey again.
My lord, could you, I know this is an odd thing to ask, but could you say something else? There seems to be a problem between the visuals and the sound.
Yes, I can speak to you. I can talk about the weather, which is not particularly good where I am. Is that helping you at all?
Yeah, I can now see clearly that you're well out of sync. If you can just pause for a second, I'll see if I can hit the technical team. It's just as difficult if... And good morning again. My lord, I understand the best way to try and resolve this is simply to begin, and hopefully they'll come into sync in a few moments.
All right, that's fine by me. Good. Now, we have another witness?
We do, Mrs. Johnston.
Very good, thank you.
Will be brought in just now.
Good.
Good morning, your lord.
Now, good morning, Mrs. Johnston. Please take a seat, and Mr. Caskey has some questions for you.
Yes. Mrs. Johnston, I know that you have a statement that you want to read at the beginning, and I've indicated that I'll facilitate that. But would you tell the inquiry your full name, please?
Elaine Johnston.
And we're here to talk about your brother.
Yes.
And he was born on the 26th of December 1963 and died on the 6th of February 2021.
Yes.
I understand that you have brief opening remarks you want to make to
Yes.
the inquiry.
And thank you. I just would like to say, your lordship, that I'm here today on behalf of my family in the hope to get some respect and dignity for Robert that he did not receive in the last 11 months of his life. And I'd also like to thank you and your inquiry team for the opportunity to be Robert's voice. A voice that was taken definitely without compassion, without any consideration to his human rights, his mental health, and even his basic rights. So thank you so much for allowing that.
Now, in relation to your brother, there was a serious incident which I will ask you about in a moment, which happened on the 24th of September 2017. Tell me about Robert before that.
Robert was taken to Cross House Hospital.
No, not that day. Before that.
On the 24th, he'd been working overtime.
No. Let's go back. Let's go back.
That is the 24th of September.
Let's go back to before the 24th of September.
All right, okay.
Tell me about what he was like.
Oh, what he was like, sorry. He was a very quiet boy, not like his big sister. Shy. Really quite insulated. He kept everything in. Very, very hard worker. Great family man.
What kids did he have?
Pardon?
What kids did he have?
He had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl.
And his wife?
They had been married for 37 years.
Tell us something else about him.
Well, he was stubborn. He was a very bad loser. And I think that grit and determination was what's seen Robert through for the serious incident that happened to him and gave him the will, because he just wouldn't give in, thankfully. So he could be funny, but he needed a wee drink to have that confidence. He loved bowling and dominoes. That was his shared passion with my dad. So when he did have a wee tipple, he definitely relaxed a wee bit more, and you got to see the real feelings. But the rest of the time, the feelings were well hid, even from his own children, of which was his proudest achievements, and loved them dearly.
He had one long-standing health problem.
Yeah.
What was that?
At the age of 12, Robert became type 1 diabetic. And it was something that actually marked the rest of his life going forward. And probably the reason that he became so insulated within himself, because his ambition was to join the Navy. And Robert was quite a clever young man. And he went through the process of to applying with flying colours, but never even thought that the diabetes would be an issue until it came to the medical side. And then when they told him, oh, sorry, you couldn't join the Navy, he became so disappointed and went the very next day and got a job in a factory, which his education and his abilities were well above, but he settled because through disappointment.
At the beginning, I gave you the date of the 24th September 2017.
Yes.
Tell me about that day now.
As usual, Robert, it's a Sunday, Robert took overtime again because he just worked solely for money for the family, you know, and he was working, come home to pick up his wife, and she thought he was acting a wee bit strange, but put it down to a diabetic hypo, because obviously over the years she had seen many of these hypos, and they can manifest themselves in where he's talking a wee bit gibberish and acting a wee bit out of strange. So she got him home, fed him, and said, go to your bed, you're needing some rest. And through the night, he didn't seem to feel any better, but insisted he was going to his work in the morning. Robert never missed a shift. My brother had a serious hypo, and the next day got up out the hospital bed and went straight to work. That was the kind of man that he was, you know. You don't miss a shift.
On 27th, 28th September, did he go to the hospital then?
It was actually the very next day. It was the 25th.
Right, sorry.
So on the Monday morning,
Yes.
he got up to go to work, and he definitely was acting strange. And his wife said, I don't think you should go. And he said, nonsense. And she's getting ready for work, and she said, let me call the doctor. And he said, no. But then I think something changed within himself. He knew, and he went, you know what, I will just rest, but you go to your work, and I'll just lie on the couch. And that's what he did for an hour or two. But his wife was worried, so she called his eldest son and go in and check on your dad. And he did, and he knew straight away. So he phoned his mum and said, you better come home now. And they called an ambulance, and Robert was taken up to Crosshouse Hospital.
What tests did they do?
They were running some scans, and obviously the usual blood blood tests, etc., etc. But at that time, it had seemed to pass, and Robert was walking, talking, and basically saying, I'm getting out of here, I'm going home, I don't like hospitals, I'm fine.
What did the scan show?
Well, by this time I've
stage?
arrived at the hospital, and the scan at Cross House thought that they seen some bleeding at the back of the brain. And that hospital is not equipped for further examinations into that kind of illness. So they said they were sending Robert up to the Queen Elizabeth in Glasgow. And that was the reason that his wife brought me, because Robert wasn't going, and I told him he was, you know. So up we went, and we arrived at the Queen Elizabeth maybe around about 6 o'clock that evening, and they were going to do a more in-depth scan to the brain. They obviously came in, was asking Robert a few questions, and a consultant came and asked him if he'd been suffering from some headaches in the last few weeks, and never had said to anybody, but then says, well, if you're asking, I got a new hard hat, and I did feel a wee bit pain at the back, but it was probably the hard hat pushing in at the back because it was a bit tight. And that was the first time that we'd heard that he'd actually been suffering from headaches.
Did the hospital send him home that day?
No. And thank God they did not. No, what they said was, it looks like that you've been really lucky, you've had a minor stroke, but sometimes these can be followed by secondaries. So we're going to keep you in overnight, and we're going to do a deeper scan, but it's going to not get done to probably about midnight, Robert. So, but in the morning, your family can come and get you home. And that was all he was worried about. I'm not staying here, Elaine. I went, yes, you are. This is serious. You get this fixed. So we left him about 11:30 that night. He was comfortable. He was sitting on top of the bed, walking, talking. Not best pleased he was going to get kept in, but had agreed. So I didn't stay in Ayrshire, where my brother and his family and my mother live. But we had taken his wife and his eldest son to the hospital, so we went back to Ayrshire that night, and I stayed with my mum, explained to her what was going on, and just about 12:30, 1:45, his wife texted to say, he's had the scan, everything's looking good, we have to pick him up early in the morning. I went, okay, we'll go get to your bed. So we go to our beds, and at 2:30, 2:45 in the morning, I got a phone call from his daughter screaming, you need to come and get us now. We have to get to the hospital fast. I went, okay, calm. But she was so upset that I'm thinking, what's happened here? So I phoned the hospital, and they explained that Robert had suffered a severe brainstem stroke that had come on just about 2:30, and very, very quickly. And for us to get there as fast as we could. And we did.
When you got to the hospital, was Robert conscious?
No. Thankfully, because he was there. If he had been at home or even in Cross House, it was so catastrophic that he would have passed there and then. And it was catastrophic. But because he was there, a neurosurgeon was on hand, and they induced a coma. And that's how we seen Robert, in an induced coma with, obviously, tracks, tubes, everything. And they basically said, look, there's nothing we can do now until the morning. We're going to bring him round probably between 10 and 11 in the morning, get some rest, and come back. Thankfully, we have some relatives it lives in Bearsden, right next to the Queen Elizabeth. So rather than trail all the way home, we went there for a few hours to get a cup of tea, and we were there for 10 o'clock in the morning.
And did they reduce his sedation? Be waking?
They brought him round, yeah. And unfortunately, we're all there. My mum, his children, his wife, myself, my husband. And the surgeon comes in and says, "We're really sorry. We don't know how it happens, but unfortunately Robert has got locked-in syndrome." Wow, what is that?
Well, that was quite a long time ago. You now know what locked-in syndrome is. Can you tell us...
I could be an honorary doctor in the field.
Can you tell us, just in layman's terms, what you understand it to be?
Okay. It's the curse of the living dead. You're buried alive in your own body. So Robert's in there, perfectly aware of absolutely everything, and can move nothing. Not a finger, not a toe, nothing. There is some cases, and it did happen, thankfully from that day, that he could move his eyeballs up or down to, with the help of the nurses, to say yes or no. But he is aware of everything that is going on. So, but the surgeons basically said, "We're so sorry. That's it. There's nothing else we can do." And I'm not a person to accept that kind of thing.
I think we'll find that out.
Yeah. And I said, "No, there's got to be something."
You talk at paragraphs 42 and 43 in your witness statement about conversations that's happening in the hospital. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about that?
Well, obviously that was what they said to us was, look, he's type 1 diabetic. He's had this catastrophic brainstem stroke. He's locked in. There's nothing we can do. Better just to let him pass. And also, too, if you don't, he's going to pass anyway, because with a non-movement, some infection or another will take him. And if it's not this infection, it'll be the next.
And was that something that you and your sister-in-law accepted?
No, definitely not. But we were stunned. We felt as if we'd just been sucker punched, you know.
Could you read paragraph 44, please?
Mm. But that set the tone for me and his wife. From then on in, we were absolutely terrified that they were going to let him die. So we made a conscious decision, and we never left his side. And there was many times they tried to put us out. And he was never left alone from morning till night.
We'll get to that.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get to that. The next part of your witness statement talks about a DNA CPR. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that conversation.
Well, that doesn't actually happen until Robert has been punted. And I'm using the word punted because that's what happened to him from Queen Elizabeth, where there was a specialised brain injury clinic there. And because I challenged the neurosurgeon, he said, "Sorry, we can't keep Robert here. He's not part of our postcode. User Ayrshire, I'm sorry, he needs to go back to Cross House Hospital." And I said, "You've got to be joking. Yous are the specialists here. Yous don't even know. How are a wee village hospital going to know?" But that's what he did. He had him there. This happened to Robert in September.
Well, we're going to come to the time that he was in Cross House. I think when you were in the hospital, there was a discussion between yourselves and the doctors, and I'm referring to paragraph 45.
Yeah.
This is when he's moved to Cross House.
So we're back in Cross House.
So he was transported down to Cross House.
Happened to him in the September, and before Christmas we were in Cross House Hospital.
Mm-hmm. And tell me about the discussion that you're having.
Well, like I said, we never left his side, and all of a sudden these three individuals, one female, two males, never seen it before in our lives, came in and said, "We would like you to leave the room. We need to speak with Robert." And I said, "Okay, who are you?" And they gave their titles as consultants and a doctor. And I said, "And what are you going to be discussing with Robert?" And they said, "Really, that's something that we need to discuss with Robert." So, although I trusted nobody by this time, I have to think that maybe these people are here to help, you know, so let's go out the room. And the reason it's myself that's doing this and not his wife is because that happened to Robert in September, and in October, her dad died in Cross House Hospital. And by the time we get to Cross House, our mum's dying downstairs, and Robert's up on the 3rd floor. So that girl was unable to even think of her name. So she asked me to be the spokesperson. So anyway, we leave, and they're in there for maybe half an hour, and they come out. We're in a relative room. They come out, and I say, what's been going on? And they said, "Do you have a power of attorney for Robert?" And we said, "No." And he said, "Well, we recommend that you get it very, very quickly and as fast as you can. And we have just discussed with Robert for a DNR to be put on Robert, and he's quite happy to do that." And I went, "If you went there, sir, I would be using bad language," because that's what I said to them. And I said, "Do you even know how to communicate with my brother?" And they went, "Oh, I'm sure he nodded." I said, "You're sure he nodded?" I said, "Well, let's go back in that room and I'll make sure if he nodded." So we went back in, and I explained to Robert what they were asking. And you never seen such horror or fear in somebody's face. He actually, without moving, looked as if he sat back. And I said, "Is that what you want?" And from nowhere, and for the first time, my brother went and moved that head with every force that he could. So that DNR didn't happen.
Okay. I understand possibly through his children, searching the internet, you made contact with someone else who had
Obviously, like
locked-in syndrome.
Yeah, we didn't have a clue about locked-in syndrome, but he has very smart and clever children, thankfully. And that very night, they went onto the internet and researched what this locked-in syndrome was and what we could do. And they found a lady who had, at the age of 36...
Please don't name her.
No, I won't. And she had suffered this and survived. And through her survival had become an honorary doctorate and was now teaching neurosurgeons and doctors about the condition and how you worked that condition and how you have to fight to get that body to wake up.
Now, did she advise or train you in things to do with Robert?
Yeah, I contacted her and we actually flew her up for the weekend. And she came and she spent that whole weekend in his room explaining, showed him pictures of her and what it took, what she'd heard while she was in that condition from nurses in her room, doctors in her room, even with her family saying, there's no hope here, oh my goodness, blah, blah, blah. So she explained everything to Robert, and she had used a device. She made herself a spelling chart. Mm-hmm. It was colour-coded, and it allowed her to communicate. Once everybody learned that she could communicate, so she taught us and she taught Robert. And that's how Robert started communicating with us, with his nursing teams and doctors. And to be truthful, she was the person that saved his life, because although she was telling us to tell him until she got there, we know you're in there and you need to fight. He probably thought they're just saying that.
Where, at this point, was he receiving physiotherapy?
He was receiving chest physio to keep the lungs from totally filling up. They're still at the point that Robert's going to pass. No point to this.
And after your weekend with
the lady.
I was going to say honorary doctor. After your weekend with the lady, what did you start to do, and what impact did that have, if any?
Well, the biggest impact was probably Robert, because he believed. He seen somebody. He heard her. So she saved his life, and then he knew what he had to do, and he had to work. But she also spoke to nursing staff there too and said, we're expecting this man to run a marathon and you need to feed him. Because they kept, if Robert was moved, he sometimes got a bit sickly. Further down the line, we found it was just pure motion sickness if they moved him too quickly. But they kept thinking he was choking or aspirating because he had a track. And if it happened on a Friday, then Robert wasn't fed again till the Monday, until the dietitian could come in.
Well,
so he was losing weight rapidly. And my brother was 6'6".
What, you were saying that he was getting some kind of physiotherapy. Were you and his wife doing other things?
Yeah.
Tell us about that. We
were moving him, moving arms, legs, and we were making it up as we went along. And it's a long story, and I know we don't have that time, so I'll cut it short. They refused to actually bring in physio. They didn't think that they had the hours or the manpower to supply somebody in his condition with that. So I took it to the papers, I took it to the telly, I took it everywhere, MSPs, everywhere, and anybody that would listen. And I fought, and we paid for private physio to come into an NHS hospital, which they tried to object to. And I said, okay, you tell me we can't bring physios in, then you get them. Or I'm bringing that private physio in. And we brought private physios in. She taught us how to move Robert when she wasn't there, and she worked with Robert 2 to 3 times a week.
And what was the effect of that physiotherapy?
Absolutely amazing.
I'm only talking about the initial stage.
Yeah, the initial stage, we're getting them to, on command, and I have it on video, move an arm up, bring it up to your shoulder, wiggle your finger, put your arm down, wiggle your toes, try to lift your knee. You had to look really closely for that knee to be lifted, but it was lifting. It was lifting. Head, to bring his head forward, to try to, like you do with a baby, learn that baby to hold its own head up, you know.
How did the staff at Cross House deal with that? How were they?
Well, unfortunately, when we got put to Cross House, we got lied to. We got told we were going to the stroke unit. And I'm thinking, well, we're at the stroke unit, there'll be people in there that understand strokes and they'll help. But when we got there, it was put into the high dependency unit. And these people are very busy, extremely busy. So at the beginning, it was quite a fight. But again, to cut the story short, Robert was in there for 2 years. And you heard me, 2 years in a high dependency unit. So he was a bed blocker. And that staff became family. And we trusted them, and they trusted us. And even when they were so busy, they took the time out to move him, to follow our instructions, and to keep that movement going. And one of them found upstairs lying in a room an electric bike for people with disabilities, and said, I think Robert would benefit from this. And they brought it into his room, and that stayed there for a year. That equipment was worth £8,000 and it wasn't getting used. I had to dust it off, but it turned out to be an absolute wonderful thing.
Tell me about how it worked. What happened?
Well, Robert was in a chair, obviously, and you strapped the bike to his legs strapped to the bike, and it had some handlebars, but they really weren't for any purpose. It was really for the leg movement. And then you just basically switched it on, and it looked as if he was pedalling.
But the energy came from the bike, rather
The energy came from the bike at the beginning, right? But more so, it came mentally. Robert seen those legs moving. He thought his knees were moving up and down. And I've got that on video. And
so he's on the bike, and
every day we put him on every day.
And the bike is effectively moving his legs.
Yes.
Because the electric motor's turning.
Yeah.
What happens when you turn the electric motor off?
Well, it stops. But then Robert, we tried it, and Robert keeps pedaling. And he pedals for a minute, pedals for 10 minutes. And just before he died, he was pedaling for half an hour to 3/4 of an hour on his own. We never used the electric bit after that. He also passed a test for an electric wheelchair, for him to manoeuvre it himself. And it was like he had to sit 2 driving tests, through obstacles, in and out, working it himself. And that boy did that.
Now, you spoke about the possibility of him going to the stroke unit at Cross House, and he ended up going into...
No, that's where they told us they were sending us.
Yeah. So it was a possibility, but when he got there, he went to the elderly unit. Did he get back to the Queen Elizabeth?
Yeah. And this is where the story's too long, and I won't bore you.
You're not boring us.
Through the fights from Cross House, I got him the first 8-week period of intensive rehabilitation up at that brain injury clinic. I wanted him to go at the beginning. And they were the people that got him to pass the test for the electric wheelchair, to make him a wee bit more independent. But there's only 2 of these brain injury clinics in the whole of Scotland, one in Glasgow, one in Edinburgh, and they service the whole of Scotland. So the bed is like gold, and they also do it like day patients coming in for physiotherapy. Anyway, Robert got an 8-week stay, and then he went back to Cross House. And then about 6-7 months later, I got another 8 weeks, and I got him back there. But by this time, we've had him out home. I brought him to my house for him to spend some time with his sons watching the football. My mother had her 80th birthday, and we booked a restaurant just beside the hospital. And we put him in a taxi in that chair, and he enjoyed his mother's 80th birthday for the boy that was locked in and couldn't do anything.
Tell me about his communication. I understand what you're saying about him being able to move his eyes and later finger and so on. Was he able to talk?
No.
Did he get speech therapy?
Well, he got some. He got a very little. And again, they didn't believe that Robert was communicating with us.
When you say they, who do you mean?
Therapists.
Right, speech therapists.
Speech and physio. Okay.
And there's a particular account in your witness statement at paragraph 81 and 82. Do you want to tell us the story, or do you want to read it?
I'll just tell you very quickly that they didn't believe us that Robert was communicating through the alphabet chart that this honorary doctor had taught us and taught Robert. And she came in for her 20-minute session this day and asked me to leave the room. And I said, well, you know that we don't leave, Robert. I would rather be here. And she said, well, truthfully, I think that we're just getting your opinion and not Robert's. So I want you to leave the room. And I said, okay. I said, you hear her? I said, you tell her. And I left the room. And she came out after 20 minutes crying. And I thought I'd punched her. I thought, well done. And she said, oh my God, Elaine, I'm so sorry. He's just spelled out to me, treat me better. I never missed a letter. And that's what he spelled, treat me better. So they, again, now have changed their opinion and start working with us, and they start giving a wee bit more and start teaching us to how for him to swallow. You know, Robert would never have, if he had lived, would never have spoke again. The damage here was too catastrophic, but he certainly would have walked again, and there was evidence of that.
Tell me about, read paragraph 83, please.
There was a lot of persuading doctors. I understand that it was new to everybody. And that neurosurgeon on the first...
No, that's not in there.
No, but the next night had said to us that he had never worked with a locked-in syndrome person. So that's where this part comes. I understand that there was lots of complications, and on paper, it certainly looked as if Robert shouldn't have survived, and I understood that. But sometimes the manuals and all the medical books and whatever, everything reads, there's just some miracles can happen if you have the hope and if you have the fight. And that's what my brother showed and had. And he had that fight. He wanted to survive, so he worked.
Paragraph talks about that. Hello again, sir. I apologise for the breach of the restriction order, which has now been expunged. I was reading at the point at which I broke the restriction order. I was reading from paragraph 87. I'll read it again, but this time not breach of the restriction order. Once we got the doctors and nurses to believe, they started doing things with Robert, even though it was high dependency and they were busy. But when they had time, they were going in, moving arms and moving legs, just like my sister and I did. They started to have a wee bit more belief. Mm-hmm. None of this would have been possible if my sister and I hadn't been going in every day to work with Robert. I would do 8:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. and she would do 2:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. We were almost a nuisance for the staff at the high dependency unit. Were you going in every day? Mm-hmm. A morning shift and an
We were actually, before that, we were doing night shift also, but because now we've got a working relationship with the staff and we trust the staff there, and he's been there a wee while, that we got finished for 8 o'clock, if you like. But there was also times that his children were in there doing things also, you know, that, and taking their turns.
At paragraph 90, you say that your sister and you were effectively Robert's care plan.
Yes.
Was that correct?
Yeah. Believe it, the reason he couldn't get into the stroke unit was because of the track. The staff in there weren't trained in the track, and the ones that had been trained, you need to keep renewing that. So that was the reason he had to go into high dependency, so they told us. But they trained my sister-in-law and myself within 2 days how to change that and clean that and look after that.
Now, paragraph 91, you say that late 2019 to March 2020 was a particularly important time. Your brother and sister-in-law's home was assessed for the possibility of Robert going home.
Oh, he was coming home. We just couldn't work out if what we had to do to his house, or did we have to get another house because of his height and the length of his chair, you know, for the occupational therapist and demand and need a certain circumference for a turning point for safety and everything. So,
So what was decided? His own house or somewhere else?
It needed to be a more purpose-built house for his condition.
And was that organised?
Yes, but it took a long time. This NHS and social care are meant to work hand in hand, and I can assure you that's not what happens. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. But so it took a long time, but finally they had agreed, and the house, and a brand new house that was being built for the local authorities, and they have to provide so many disability houses and everything now when they build. And Robert and his wife were going to receive.
And how was his general health? I mean, we've heard about his... Yeah,
Robert, he's still in high dependency, but he's on no medication other than his insulin and paracetamol. Sometimes when he got a wee headache, you know, that he was clinically stable, had been clinically stable for quite a while.
How long?
Oh, probably by the time we move him, not home, but to the unit that he got moved to, 7 or 8 months, he had been clinically stable. But the house just was taking such a long time. You're going back and forth, and everybody's wanting to argue whose budget Robert should be on. Should he be on NHS? Should he be on social care? You know, because they didn't want to provide the physiotherapy that would have given him more movement. But it turns out that would have cost him £16,000 a year. But because they didn't, and he didn't have the movement that he should have had at that stage, it was going to cost him nearly £1 million a year for Robert to be at home, because they needed 2 full-time carers plus equipment, and they were going to have to pay for that.
At paragraph 98, you talk about big news in the family. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that.
Well, Robert's been moved by now, you know, that he's in a place called Woodland View. It's a purpose-built mental health assessment unit and an in-house unit that it's been built in Irvine, which is a wee bit even closer to Robert's house. And he's moved there because obviously high dependency is not the place for him to be. He was a bed blocker. These beds are vital. And I note the timing now. I didn't note it at the time, but it's January 2020. So are they aware they need to empty the beds? But anyway, they come to us with a suggestion that to go to this unit, although it wasn't suitable for Robert, it was better than where he was, and they were quite right. It had beautiful grounds, it had a beautiful room with a shower, because we didn't have that in the high dependence unit, so it was bed baths most of the time. So to be able to take him into the shower and get him a proper wash, and everything seemed right. At a beautiful wee cafe.
He's in Crosshouse, and then
they move him there in January.
They move him there in January. Mm-hmm. What's the plan? Where is he going to be in?
He's there. He's actually in what they call a palliative care unit for the elderly.
That's the unit he's in. But
that's the ward he goes to.
What's the plan for him?
The plan is my sister-in-law and I.
While he's there, but is the intention that he's going to stay in Woodland View forever? No, he's only going there because the house is to be ready by the June. Right. So it was from a temporary measure, and it would give us more hands-on experience, but also more comfortable for Robert to get out and about and get some more fresh air, and easier for him to manoeuvre in and out, because he had French doors from his bedroom out into a courtyard, etc. But we took Robert there first for Robert to decide, because he was going in with a whole load of elderly people, and obviously they were in there. You've described the nature of Woodland View, mm-hmm. and it doesn't seem it's a rehabilitation centre. No, it's nothing to do with rehabilitation. Did anyone, the staff there, take any measures to make life easier? Because he had a track and everything, and they were working with elderly palliative care residents. 4 of the staff actually volunteered, God love them, to go and get some training and for the peg feeding, for the track, for the manhandling of Robert, and the lifting, etc. And actually they did it on their own time. So we were very grateful to them for doing that. The next part of your witness statement relates to lockdown. Mm-hmm. Tell me about lockdown. Well, obviously, 105 went up. Yeah, Robert's there, and we're his main carers, because they don't have that kind of staff levels and everything, and he needs basically 24 hours. You know, just even a simple thing like turning on his telly or turning his telly over, that although he was starting to get the buttons, but he didn't get it all the time on a wee small remote control. So it was better for us to be there all the time. And comes March, we're already worried about this COVID, because we're seeing it on the telly, and his wife's exceptionally worried because she's had to go back to work, because obviously no money coming in from Robert now, and she was an essential worker. She worked at the schools. Could you read paragraph 105? 105. Okay. And 6. Okay. Oh, there. Okay. No, can you read it out? We all went into lockdown on the 23rd of March 2020, but I reckon it was maybe the 28th or the 29th was the last day that my sister-in-law and I were allowed in. We were allowed into the hospital to do cleaning, changing, sorting his peg, feeding, cleaning, and the care of the track. Everything that we had been doing before. And 106?
That's the bit I've just read, because the 105 wasn't there.
Sorry. So they drew a line under your attendance to provide that level of care.
Yeah.
And how did you react to that?
Well, obviously absolute fear. Fear of the virus, fear of what was going to happen to him. They didn't have the staff levels. All the staff didn't have that kind of training. I mean, and to be fair, the manager of the unit was also scared because she's not sure how they're going to cope with looking after Robert to the level of care that he needed. So we were absolutely petrified. But
did that become apparent in a phone call with the manager? I'm looking at 110. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, I phoned her and asked her how she was going to manage. And they'd been very kind and all those nurses volunteering and everything. But how are they going to manage without us being there? And she actually started to cry and said, Elaine, I don't know. I honest to God, I don't know. So, because they were, this was new to them, they were scared for their other elderly patients, and they were scared for themselves because they were getting no information. They were just told, lock it down, no more visitors.
What happened in relation to visits after it was locked down? Did you see Robert again?
Yeah, well, we were very lucky compared to a lot of people. He was on a ground floor and he had a window. Mm-hmm. So we stood at that window every day, all day, in turns, because somebody had to alert the staff that he was choking, or the track needed cleaned, or he wanted moved, or the telly had to be turned. And they couldn't keep coming in and out, and part of their policy was as hands-off as possible to keep the residents safe. So they tried to do as little as possible. Everybody was locked in their rooms, if you like. But Robert was definitely locked in his room. He couldn't get up out that bed himself and walk and go anywhere.
So how did you, this was all family members, or most family members involved in this?
Yeah, he had some friends also that would say, look, we'll take a wee turn, we want to go over, and you know, we're 3.5 years down the line from his initial stroke, so.
How long were people staying? Did you have a shift system?
We as a family, we did mostly 2 to 3 hours, you know, depending on what was happening, but definitely every 2 hours we did it.
What, standing in the garden, outside his window?
Mm-hmm.
From when till when?
I was always the first person normally, so I was probably about 8:30. Sometimes you like to have a long lie, so you got a wee scowl if you went too early, you know.
As time went on, restrictions relaxed. What was the impact of that?
Well, they did start to relax in the summer months, and his wife was allowed for only one person for a wee half hour every day, but she had to test and full PPE, and also she had to, well, she didn't have, she chose, and thankfully she gave up work to make sure that she could get in, you know, because she couldn't go to a school and take the risks, and so she got in for a half hour, and God love her.
Did she go every day?
Every day. And it was, the minute she walked in the room, he would do this, and every day did it. Meaning he wanted his hair washed because his hair felt itchy. He wasn't being cleaned the way that he had been before. And he felt itchy and he felt a wee bit dirty and grubby. So somehow her washing his hair made him feel a wee bit better. And she went, I just did it yesterday. He wouldn't take no for an answer. And that half hour, it took her a half hour to wash that hair. And that was our visit over.
In your statement at paragraph 118, you talk about problems with, or you talk about your experience of PPE and infection control.
Yeah.
How was it during the first lockdown?
The first lockdown, everybody seemed so scared and so precise. Anytime I seen anybody coming into to Robert, they were in full like hazmat suits and full PPE, and only ever one nurse at a time. Even when we were doing the visits, it was, don't open that window. The window had to be closed at all times. But when there was nobody else there, we opened the window so he could hear us, you know. But the first lockdown, definitely, to me, everything was being followed. But you could see that staff were tiring. Staff starting to change. I wasn't getting the same regular faces. And when I was asking them, off sick, left. You know, so by the summer we did see, oh my God, how's the staff going to keep this up? Never in anybody's expectations, I think, did we think we're going to be locked down for so long. You know, and that includes all the staff. And
did you notice over time a reduction in the level of infection control measures?
Yeah. By the second lockdown, we're back at the window all the time, and Robert hasn't been out of room, by the way. We had to push even to get him out of bed sometimes because they didn't have the staff. There's other side of this unit had the mental health side, and these residents were getting out for a daily exercise. But basically, it was a clan meeting for the smoking, and they all met together in their wee huddles and smoked, and then went straight back in. Anyway, I also was at the window on one occasion, and a porter comes to Robert's door, stops outside. He's got a trolley and it's full of bedding, and he's got just a clear penny on and one of the wee blue masks, but it's not really on his face properly, and he just comes straight in and he puts the bedding in his wardrobe and walks back out.
Did you discuss things like that, breaches, apparent breaches of COVID rules? Did you discuss that with your sister-in-law?
Yeah.
And what was...
and she felt that she had seen a couple of things, not them actually inside the room, but going up and down the corridors, the porters, the cleaners, and they weren't in full PPE. But she also was very, very worried because by this time now, we hardly know any staff members. It's bank staff that's coming in and out, you know. And we know by speaking to the manager of the unit that she's at a breaking point, really. And so my sister-in-law said to me, please, Elaine, don't make a fuss. What if they take it out on him? What if they take it out on me? And I don't get him. Please, let's just pray. So I didn't make a big fuss. I also had a nurse who I loved dearly. And I appeared at the window unexpectedly, probably, for her. And there she's in the room, no PPE, no face mask. And when she sees me, oh, hi, Elaine, I'm sorry. I've just nipped in to turn his telly, I swear. I've not went anywhere near him. So what do? You know, she was very good to Robert and very good to us, so. And these people are risking their own life too, so.
The next section of your statement relates to vaccine. Was Robert ever vaccinated?
No.
You don't strike me as a lady who's backwards and coming forwards.
Yeah.
Was that something that you raised?
Oh, many times. Obviously, when the vaccines were announced, it was something that I kept an eye on, and I know that Ayrshire and Arran had vaccines available at the beginning of December, but obviously they've got to vaccinate the vaccinators first, and I understood that, but from that day, I'm remembering get him, because he's the most clinically vulnerable person they've got. He's also that huge risk to them, never mind him catching it.
Explain that.
Well,
what do you mean by that?
Because you can't do hands off with Robert. That track needed to be cleaned. He had to be peg fed. It's airborne. When you're changing this track, air particles come out. So if he's got it, he's given it to a member of staff. So I was totally convinced they'll vaccinate him first because they don't want their staff to catch it. And that kept reassuring my sister-in-law that, don't worry. And we've got all the way through the year. Please don't panic. They'll do it. They'll vaccinate him first.
During or prior to lockdown occurring, you obviously, along with your sister, were very involved in effectively caring for Robert. That just stopped completely from what you say when lockdown happened. What was the impact of that on Robert?
Well, at first I think he understood. Like I said, Robert had full capacity. He was watching the news like everybody else. So, and he's thinking, God, I've got this far and I'm nearly home. I'm not wanting to catch anything either. So Robert understood, and definitely in the first month. I would say after the second month, when he wasn't getting taken out of that bed every day and put in a chair and being able to sit up at the window or go out of the room or anything like that, you could see the mood changing a wee bit. You know, there was a wee bit of frustration with him and a wee bit bad temper coming in, like he actually spelled out, he's out of here.
When I understand that his first COVID test was 15th or 16th of January. How did that, what was the impact of that? What was the result?
Well, what we were told was that somebody had tested positive within the ward and that they were testing all the other patients, of which was 14 at the time, including Robert. And oh my God, how could that have happened? So I'm screaming for the vaccine now because I know they've got it. And they tested, and thankfully he was negative.
And they kept testing him?
Yeah, but it was done on the 15th or the 16th, again on the 20th or the 20th or the 21st, they had another test, and something different had happened. They cleared the whole ward up to one side except for Robert. Robert's down this side by himself, and they said that was to keep him the safest. You know, we're not taking any risks with Robert, don't worry, promise you. So.
You say in your statement at 158 that he also got tested on the 24th?
He got tested on the 24th, yeah, and unfortunately.
No.
Okay.
I think right, and you got the result on the 26th?
Yeah, on the 26th we get the phone call.
And what does the phone call say?
I'm sorry, Robert's positive. He'd been locked in a room for 11 months. Never come out. Never seen anybody except nursing or that short period that his wife got in. 11 months. He never mixed. And he's positive.
Now you say in your statement at 162 that you are having a discussion about the possibility of moving him back to Crosshouse.
Well, I panicked when they said he was positive. I knew the level of the nursing in there, and I'm not being derogative to them. That I knew they had no support. That unit didn't even have a doctor based there. A doctor only came in once a week. They weren't medically ill people. So I phoned and I demanded that he was taken back to Crosshouse.
And the outcome of that was?
Absolutely not. That basically it was too late to take him to Cross House.
So he never transferred back?
No.
You also talk at 165 about him starting on a COVID drug.
Yeah.
Do you know what that was?
No, I don't know the name of the drug, but every day they kept saying, oh, he's actually reacting very well to it. We can't believe this, because we're at the window still, and he never looked as if he was exasperated or gasping for air or anything like that. So we believed that, but I was worried about his sugar levels, because obviously this drug was sending his sugar levels and making them quite high, and they weren't aware, they didn't have that kind of level of nursing to understand it. That was going to dry his kidneys out if he ran too high for too long a period, you know. And I asked them to bring the diabetic team in from Crosshouse, and said that they couldn't come in.
Because of COVID restrictions? Mm-hmm. So,
and they said they wouldn't either.
So, he's got a problem with his diabetes, but that's not being addressed by
no. There was no attention to his diabetes whatsoever. None. They let it run high. They let it get to up to 26 and 28, and they let it run at that for the 10 days that he survived.
Paragraph 170. Could you read that out, please?
I see that the reason that I know that these kidneys are not working.
No, 170 we're looking at.
That's what it says.
Sorry, my numbers are one off apparently. Sorry.
It's okay.
171.
171. By this time, they've got staff off with COVID. They're using bank staff coming from God knows where, and they don't know anybody within the unit. And they've just come in and they just do a job and leave.
173 and 175.
And although I'm trying not to panic because of his wife.
Sorry. I've got that wrong because my numbering is out.
Yeah, because I'm thinking
174 and 176.
Okay. On the 1st of February, a senior staff nurse called Robert's wife and said that she was quite worried about him. And his wife asked if she could please go in and see him. And I believe that she broke the rules, if you like, and she said yes. And his wife went in.
And then 176.
She's there for about 4 or 5 hours, and she has to come out and go to use a bathroom. And she actually runs into the management of the whole unit. And she just got so startled, and she said, "What are you doing here?" And Robert's wife didn't obviously use the nurse's name, but explained that she needed to come in and see Robert. Robert was quite distressed, and she said, "Well, the minute you go out of here, you're not coming back in."
Did she Good afternoon, my lord. Only a few more minutes. Your sister and niece are at the hospital. Your sister bumps into hospital management and they say, when you leave, you're not getting back in. She then shouts to you. What's your reaction to that?
I said, well, you're not coming out then. You're staying in, because he's not going to pass, he's alone. So we made arrangements for clothing and food to be left at the hospital entrance, and somebody collected it, and they stayed there until he passed.
And how long was that?
4 days.
4 days. Were you present when he passed?
We all were. His 2 sons, his mother, myself, and his son's partners were at the window.
The next part of your statement relates to the funeral arrangements. What do you want to say about that?
Well, the funeral arrangements were just like same as everybody else's. You couldn't do what you wanted to do. You were told what to do. So I would rather, because I know time's short, so rather than go, because it was the exact same funeral as everybody else. Horrendous.
Okay.
I would rather tell you that where the vaccine is concerned, and the reason Robert wasn't vaccinated was because I don't believe the Ayrshire and Arran Health Board trained or allowed their staff to be supported and understood. After Robert passed, it was said to me then in January that the nurses that were vaccinating had vials with 6 doses in it, and after they administered 1 dose, they threw the rest in the bin. And it's actual fact, it hit the papers. The health board had to admit it. They only admitted to 3, it was only 3 vials, and then we caught that. But that 3 vials that went in the bin was 15 doses. And my brother was in a ward of 14 people. I also learned after his death that December, and that was the reason that COVID got in, was that they had let a patient get a Christmas break for the good of their mental health. And they went from tier 3 to tier 4 with their knowledge. And when she returned, she wasn't isolated or tested. And she did come back with COVID, and that's how it got into the unit. And through that, 18 people, including my brother, caught COVID, 2 of which were a member of staff, and they also died.
How many people from the unit died so far as you're aware?
I know 2 members of staff, and I know Robert. The other official numbers were not told to me. And I was not told that either. I had to find that out through my group, thank God for them. And they found it in the Sunday Post, the article, and sent it to me and said, it's not the unit that your brother was in. So I'm forever grateful to them for that. And I will tell you that there is, I don't know if I'm allowed, but legal investigations, and I'm being a witness for that member of staff's family to what happened to him.
Okay. Robert's grandchild, who we're not naming, did Robert get to meet him?
No. That was the biggest regret and the biggest hurt that they ever could do to my brother. We found out he was going to be born in the August, and Robert was so excited. First grandchild. And they found out it was going to be a son. So he was delighted, old-fashioned, and going to carry the Dorian name on. And then we went into lockdown, and we said, what about the baby? And they went, oh, I promise you, Robert, we promise. We will make that happen. When that child's born, you'll get to see him. And they never did. They let other people go out and get their daily exercise, and we asked, when the restrictions were lifted, end of August, beginning of September, please bring him out in his chair just to the front door, just for him to see the child. And they said, absolutely not. We have to keep him safe. And he never seen him, except for the last 2 days, through a window. And that's where my life is, through a window.
At the end of your witness statement, you talk about lessons learned. That starts at paragraph 202. And you say there that you think, although the staff were doing their best, they were proceeding on a wing and a prayer.
They were. They weren't trained for that. They were just the same as us. They didn't know about this pandemic. They didn't know. And they certainly weren't getting any help or support from an Ayrshire and Arran Health Board. And I would like this inquiry to look at the correlation of health boards, some doing good practices, some doing not. And Ayrshire and Arran came out as one of the worst in the whole of Scotland.
You talk in paragraph 203 about a particular nurse who's not named, and I'm not going to ask you to name her, but who appears to have done something spectacular.
She did.
Tell us
Right
about
at the
that.
beginning. Well, she had a clinically vulnerable husband, and she moved out her house for 3 months and never seen her husband or her children or her dog, which she said was very special to her, and moved into her mother's house, and her mother moved into hers just so she could come to her work and do her job. And they couldn't help and support somebody that gave that kind of conviction.
At paragraphs 206 and 207, you talk about a contrast between the first lockdown and the second lockdown in your experience. Can you say something about that?
Yeah. Obviously, I knew everybody. We were all scared at the beginning, and nobody knew what we were doing, and we just had to get through it the best that we can. But by the time it came to the second lockdown, these people were tired. They were done in, and they were getting no support, and a lot of them were getting a lot of blame for just trying to do a job the best that they could. And when you get that tired and brain dead, and you give up hope. So I know that they became laxed, and I know that one of them brought that into Robert. Do I blame them?
No.
Obviously, I'm hurt, but I feel sorry for them. They did their best that they could, but these health boards knew that these small village hospitals, and some even bigger wards, they didn't have the manpower, they didn't have the support, sometimes they didn't even have the equipment, and they left them to struggle.
I've taken you through the witness statement quite carefully. Could you go to paragraph 211, I think? You're talking here about what you want from the inquiry and the people who are appearing before the inquiry. You've made a number of comments, all of which will be taken into account by Lord Brailsford, but can you read 211?
So, 211. I just want people to admit their mistakes. They need to be truthful. They cannot hide, because if we're going to fix things, hiding won't help, because their mistakes are never learned then. Be honest, be open, be truthful.
Those are all the questions I have for you. Is there anything important that you think you've not said?
Loads, but I've took up enough time, you know, and I'm grateful for having this space. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. A lot.
Very good. Thank you. 2 o'clock, Mr. Caskey?
2 o'clock. 2 o'clock.